Hey listeners, if you like this podcast, check out our other show, The Dinner Table. Listen to archived content and in-depth interviews with insiders and innovative people working with food. It's on our website, www.fredopie.com. Welcome to Study Table, a conversation about student athletes with players, coaches, parents, and insiders. I'm your host, Fred Opie, a former Division I athlete and a college professor today. John Galloway was a highly recruited lacrosse goaltender from Camillus, New York, a suburb of Syracuse. He played high school ball for Hall of Fame coach Mike Masser. Galloway is one of the few college players in any sport to start all 4 years. He earned first-team All-American honors twice and had been chosen as the best player at his position twice. Galloway has been a runner-up to the National Player of the Year. He's been playing professionally for the Rochester Rattlers since 2011. He had been one of 95 of the best players selected to try out for the U.S. men's national lacrosse team in 2014. We talk about growing up in a lacrosse hotbed in upstate New York and playing for Mike Masser, and his journey into climbing the ranks as a college lacrosse coach. Today, Galloway is an assistant coach at Providence College, but he's also spent time on the coaching staff at Duke University under the leadership of John Danowski. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
John, as I mentioned to you before we started rolling, I wanted to know a little bit about the most important influences on you as a coach and what you do today. And I think a great place to start would be what I would call the dynasty. And that's Coach Masser and growing up in West Genesee. For those that don't know, and as you think about it, you know, that program has been in existence for a very long time. But what are the keys to the success that Coach Masser has had? And what parts have you taken and made a part of your own coaching toolbox?
It's a great question. I think I couldn't be more lucky as a coach to have that experience with Coach Masser and that program in general. I think what he does that's really special, that's beyond some other programs, is he really finds a way to make sure that it's a trickle-down effect from, you know, when you start the program as a modified player all the way up. Every coach has the same standards for you, and the accountability for not the lacrosse thing specifically, but more so for being a good person. You learn very quickly to be on time, to be attentive when coach is talking, and I think, you know, that attention to how players act both on and off the field is something that I've been able to borrow from Coach Masser, and what an amazing mentor to have as a young person and really kind of shape the way that I am today.
You know, John, one of the things that you see in sports, not just lacrosse, but many sports, and that is the travel teams and trying out for teams. And of course, you've been away from West Genny for a while, but how does that work out with West Genny? Are the kids doing travel teams out of that community? And what happens with the concept of being cut? At what age does that process happen, which can be very devastating for many young players?
Yeah, you know, it's become one of the very few programs where travel teams are not popular. However, with the change in recruiting, it has become more prominent. I think the one theme that's been consistent with Coach Masser is, you know, while he's okay with you playing with other teams, you know, if West Genesee lacrosse or one of our requirements gets in the way, you know, we come before the club team. And I think that's something that he's allowed guys to kind of have some more freedom in terms of exploring the travel programs, but at the same time, you know your priorities, and you know that West Genesee comes first. And then in terms of the cutting, yeah, that happens, you know, even unmodified. You know, in a town where lacrosse is so popular, you have to kind of create a situation where it's competitive, and you can't have so many numbers that nobody's getting better. So I remember kids getting cut early on in modified, and it's a daunting process because players are still growing into their own. So, you know, some of those guys came back and some of those guys never played again. So it is the reality of a competitive sport in a town where lacrosse is so popular.
Now, when I was there, and at Syracuse, I played with Todd Carey, who's down on the Hall of Fame from there. I think half our team was from West Genny at that time. And one of the things I found really enjoyable was going with my teammates during the summer to see a game at Shove Park. Does that still exist?
It does, and it's very much a staple of that program. The Shove Park Youth Program, all the way up to the box league at night, and guys that graduated years ago. Charlie Lockwood is still a Shove Park MVP there, and guys that played at the next level. I think everyone tries to come back as much as they can, not only to play, but just to see old friends and to see coach.
So unpack to people what the Shove Park experience is, and particularly highlighting the indoor, because I think it's a very unique thing that many other towns could replicate and benefit from.
Yeah, so Shove Park is where the hockey team plays during the winter, and during the summer it's just a concrete floor that they lay with an AstroTurf. And from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock they have an indoor league. There's games every hour on the hour, and it starts with the younger guys, high school kids, all the way up to the Legends group with some older players coming to play. And it really is. It's supposed to be anybody that's from the town. So anybody that played with the program or is living in the town can play in the league. And you will find often a lot of guys from outside of the town who know how competitive the league is will try to come and play. And I heard it's gotten a little bit more lenient in the past couple of years, but really an amazingly competitive environment. Something you can't really imitate in many other summer leagues.
Very interesting. When I also think about Shove Park, how much of it is a way of, and let's think about it in a financial sense, that here's a community where you want to keep the wealth, and in this sense, the lacrosse wealth in your community. There are many communities where the businesses are owned and operated by outsiders. They come in, they make a profit, they take it outside, and it never gets reinvested. How much is Shove Park a sense of reinvesting the lacrosse equity back into town, rehiring kids so they have a summer job when they come home? What's your sense of that?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's really a community feel. I mean, every year in college, up to my senior year, I was a coach at Shove Park. It is a way to bring back the knowledge that you've created and the guys that you've coached, and to share that with the younger, the next generation of lacrosse players in that town. And I think it's a way to keep everybody involved. You don't discontinue yourself from that program when you graduate high school. You come back every summer. You even come back as an adult with your kids and family to come watch you play, and it allows you to stay tied to the program consistently and at a fair price. I think the youth program is like something like $30 from out of the Parks and Rec department. So it's not a for-profit organization. It really is something to just invest in the lacrosse players in the town and really make a thriving program.
John, another issue that comes up in a lot of my interviews is overuse, where there are now kids. I just interviewed Mike Greer, who played 14 years of professional hockey, came out of St. Sebastian School here in the Boston area, and he said that he thinks that hockey in the state of Massachusetts has gone down, and one of the things that he attributes it to is that kids are playing year-round, and it's not as much fun anymore, and they're getting overused. Do you see that as a problem, or has that ever been a problem at a West Jenny? Are the kids playing, I heard you mention the hockey rink, are the kids growing up playing multiple sports, including hockey, and therefore this hasn't become a problem, or has it become year-round as well there?
Yeah, it always was kind of a concern from the outsiders, I think, because Coach Massera does a great job keeping everyone involved in lacrosse throughout the year. But, as a college coach, I know that we benefit from the multi-sport athletes. I think the best West Tennessee players that we have on our team are multi-sport guys. Coach Massera allows you to do that, but he also provides a program that's not over the top, maybe an hour a day in the fall for 4 days a week, or short sessions in the winter, where you can still kind of fine-tune your traits with also not overdoing yourself in the world of lacrosse. I think you have to find a balance. Coach Massera has done that because he focuses not just on lacrosse. Sometimes it's more about leadership or being on time, and I think he allows guys to still love the game, regardless.
So you played for Coach Massera. You went on, you played for Coach Desko, Kevin Donahue, a number of people. And I wondered, if you look at your toolbox now, what have you taken from each of these coaches or other coaches? I know certainly as a college player, I'd work summer camps all the time. So I would pick up bits and pieces from Richie Moran and some of the other greats in the game. If you look at your toolbox, where do you think it's come from?
It's, I consider myself unbelievably lucky to have been mentored by the guys that I have so far. Obviously to start with Coach Masair and to teach you the fundamentals and to teach you, what it's like to be a good person, and then just being in the Syracuse program in general. Being around Coach Simmons and then obviously Coach Defco and Donahue. You learn that you have to trust players. You really have to trust guys and let them make their own decisions. And I think they taught me to be a little bit more patient in the game and kind of composed. And then the experience with Coach Nowski obviously was a totally different one. It was one where I got to learn about the Syracuse players and how to handle guys when they're stressing about school and how to handle yourself in certain game situations. Not to really whatever you act like is what your players are going to act like. So if you get out of control, they will get out of control. And he taught me how to stay composed in the middle of games. And I just feel like I've been around 3 or 4 minds in the lacrosse world that are considered some of the greatest, and learn from each of them to create that toolbox.
For you, you work with goalies, and I'm certainly there's some things that as a defenseman that I look at. For me, a great defenseman starts with footwork. I mean, that's an intangible. Another thing for me with a great defenseman is understanding that you play body first, stick last. When it comes to goalies, can and a lot of coaches, this is a question I ask them, how much is a person born with certain things that make you a great goalie? Like in hockey, they say the ability to flop is something that's genetic and not everybody has it. How much is goalie and lacrosse something that you can teach versus there's some innate qualities that you see when you go to look at kids?
I think you can teach it. I don't think anybody is evolved to be a goalie. I think you can have athleticism, certain athletic tools, but that's true with any position. I think as long as you are an athlete, you can be taught anything. I think the guys that are thrown into the cage because they think that's the easy position, those are the guys that are tough to coach. But the guys that have any athletic traits that can are light on their feet or are explosive, any sort of, even if it was like I always compare it to a linebacker, guys that can move laterally in an instance of a second. You can teach the position, you can teach the technique, but we look for guys that are athletes that we can really kind of fine tune their skills, their skill set of the position.
So when you were coming up in the ranks, I wondered who were the goalies that you admired the most?
Hey, yeah, I was fortunate to be around a lot of great guys. Obviously, at Syracuse, Robbie Mulligan, Jason Gebhardt was there. Jay Pfeiffer was there just prior to me getting there. And then around the country, I loved watching Tillman Johnson. I thought he just made the position look really fun. So I got to learn from him. Trevor Tierney was a guy that I went and watched play when I was a kid. And I think everybody has a different style. I don't think any goalie is the same. But I think just watching some athletic guys, some fundamentally sound guys, and trying to steal a piece from each of their game and then creating my own, trying to be really aggressive in certain areas of the field, allowed me to create my style.
We'll be right back. For more interviews and related content, go to www.fredopie.com. Ask questions on Facebook at www.facebook.com/The Fred Opie Show and on Twitter at Fred Opie Show. If you enjoyed this interview with John Galloway, check out the one in our show archive with Usman Green, who talks about Yorktown High School's winning tradition. The interview is titled Building a Winning Tradition. Then head over to the show page for The Dinner Table, our other show, and listen to my interview with John Galloway for our series, The Training Table, in which we look at the role of food in an athlete's life over time. Now back to the show. So what have you had to do the most in transitioning from player to coach when you think about it? And not everybody can do it. I've seen guys who were terrific players not make the transition. I've seen the reverse, guys who were not terrific players but are outstanding coaches. What has been the transition for you?
Yeah, I think, obviously, coaching the defense now, I've been fortunate enough to learn from a lot of people on what that entails. Sometimes you focus so much on your job as a player, learning how to coach a defense and how to run a defense and how that, coincides with the goaltender. And then also just, being humble. I think that was my challenge. You think you know it all as a player, and you learn quickly that, you have to be willing to make adjustments on the fly and consider yourself wrong sometimes, and that's an ongoing process for sure. But I think that was the biggest challenge, and it's something you continue to transition to and humble yourself every opportunity you get.
As a teacher, and I see coaches as teachers, I have 7 principles that I consider the key to my own success, and one of them is styles. And when you're teaching, understanding that every kid, every player, every employee has a different style, and if you're going to reach them, you have to understand different styles. If you think of your defensemen, can you break it down to how you have to approach them differently in maybe, say, 3 different ways that you can't come each way? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, I think with the new generation of kids, that's a must. You have to learn how to coach each guy on an individual basis, and I think more importantly, you have to establish those relationships early on so they trust you. I don't think you can, just because they come to your school and they call you coach, means they trust you and you have the right to say anything that you want. Yeah, you have to earn that with building relationships and understanding, making them understand that you want the absolute best for them, and what you're saying is constructive, not demeaning. And that's something that, guys really respond to well, and they know that, their best interest is at the forefront of your mind. And I think the earlier you establish those relationships, the more productive you guys can quickly be.
I know you spent, was it a year with Coach Zanowski? How long were you with him?
Yep, just a year. Yep.
And he is one of these guys that's, he's like Coach Simmons Jr. that I played for. I mean, they're cut up differently. Well-read people, constantly thinking about the lacrosse IQ. When you think about your lacrosse IQ, I always like to ask coaches, are there certain things or certain people you're reading right now? And it doesn't have to be just a sports book, but are there certain things that you're drawn to that you read that is also influencing how you coach?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. First and foremost, having Coach Zanowski even for a year was, like you said, so similar to Coach Simmons. A guy that is an educator first, and they really believe in that. They don't believe in the yelling and screaming. They believe in teaching the guys not only just lacrosse, but life values. And I think understanding that you can learn a lot from other people, not just in sports. We actually just read a great book about character. We're actually having a gentleman come speak to our team this evening about mental toughness and character, and things like that, readings like that, where you can just steal 1 or 2 ideas. It is not an athletic profession; it's an educational profession. So anything you can read about teaching people and providing them insight outside of just X's and O's, you can create a little bit more of a foundation for what they're going to be. And we do talk about that kind of stuff a lot.
Anthony Bourdain's book, Kitchen Confidential, was his first book, and it was a book that took the cover off of the professional or celebrity chef, which every kid started thinking, I want to go to culinary school. But he's like, look, before you want to go to culinary school, you better go work in a kitchen, see what it's like, do it for a year, and then think, do you want to do this? There are a lot of people who you and I both meet as players who think they want to be a coach. I want you to do the Coaching Confidential right now and tell us, what are the things that you got to be willing to do from when you started off heading into this profession? The things, I don't have to prepare people, put it this way, I don't have to prepare people for the good stuff. Game day is the good stuff to me. Winning games is the good stuff. Your players making All-Americans is the good stuff. But I got to prepare for grading papers. That's not the good stuff. So when you think about it, for a person who's thinking about going into this profession, give them a couple things to think about that you've had to endure to get to the point where you're a full-time assistant.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think you worded it really well by saying, you have to understand that this is not just an easy way out. I think a lot of people who play lacrosse and aren't really ready to make a decision to say, hey, I'll continue with the sport. Coaching is a challenge on a daily basis. I think the biggest fear for me is that you're letting your players down in terms of developing them as people, and people don't realize how long that takes. This is not something where you show them something or tell them something and it automatically translates. It's a daily fight to make sure that they're doing things the right way. You have to hold them accountable on a daily basis, or things do not translate. And beyond that, the profession is something that it's a results-oriented business. You have to also keep in mind that you have to win and lose, and sometimes people think that comes really easily. A lot of outsiders, the way that they talk about coaches. I think until you're in the profession, until you realize how many intelligent people are in this profession, you got to really work. You got to buckle down and make a commitment to A, being humble, being willing to make change, and B, being having a steel moral compass. That's something that I've learned from Coach Janowski. If you don't have a steel moral compass, you're going to take shortcuts, and at the end of the day, even though it may result in 1 or 2 wins, it's going to result in your ultimate demise. And I've learned that having a steel moral compass really can guide you, but it's not easy. It's not something that is easy to operate on a daily basis.
What about the importance of having mobility and flexibility? And what I mean by that, when you're married or when you have a kid or when you have a mortgage, is that going to make it that much more difference to evaluate a job or moving from one place? You were down in North Carolina, now you're up here in Rhode Island. You're still playing. How does that affect? And I always try to tell people who are thinking about grad school, if you got a lot of debt, you shouldn't be looking at grad school because it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
So tell me about setting yourself up. Let's say you're a junior and you're listening to this podcast, or even a senior. What would you say to set yourself up to see if you want to be a coach? How can you position yourself?
Yeah, I think you have to look at it from all angles. First and foremost, your family. That should be, the most important concept. And, for me, I have a family that I see very rarely now. They live in Syracuse still, and when I was in North Carolina, it was almost none. And then you have to be willing to move your family. Coaches are trying to climb the ladder, just like you see in the big-time sports of football and basketball. And you have to be willing to say, hey, I want to continue my profession, and that might be at the cost of moving my family. And then beyond that, it's the recruiting. There's times where I'm not home for weeks at a time during the summer because of recruiting and continuing to play in the MLL. And that poses a strain on your life and your social life. And then you talk about having a mortgage, having kids. This is 7 days a week for the most part. Especially in the spring and the summer, you're very rarely getting time off. And I think it's important to know that you have a boss who understands family. That's important to you, and you have a lifestyle where you can maintain it and be happy and not be miserable coming to work. And I can say that I'm happy every day I come into work. I love what I do. But at the same time, it's at a cost of somewhere else in my life. And you have to make sure you're willing to make those sacrifices to be an elite coach. And you don't want to do a half-ass. And you're shorting the guys on your team if you do a half-ass. And I believe that if you're going to be a coach, you have to commit to it wholeheartedly.
How often do you call on the coaches that you've worked with, from Coach Mercer to the Syracuse to the Duke staff? Do you call on these people when you have a question, or what do you do?
I do. I rely on Coach Janowski and Coach Caputo, the offensive coordinator at Duke, pretty often. I just think that they're great family men. They're guys that have really supported me and taken me in almost as a son when I was getting into the coaching profession. And they taught me what was important about it. And I probably would not be coaching if I didn't have the opportunity to go work for them my first year and really learn about what it takes to be a coach and what it takes to be a good person. So I call on those guys often. Coach Donahue is a guy that I've leaned on my entire career, both as a player and as a coach. I just think his moral compass is really strong. I don't think he's ever strayed from that compass, and that's a guy that I believe in that has really guided me. And, trying to use any resources you have. If you've met a guy along the way that I've been fortunate enough to do, and a guy like Coach Mercer or Coach Deegan, those guys will always provide you with honest criticism and certain feedback that sometimes some people just won't give to you, and those guys aren't afraid to do that, and that's why I feel like I have a special relationship with them.
John, were you a multi-sport athlete in high school?
Yeah, I played basketball as well.
Did you have game, or were you a bench warmer?
I'm actually pretty decent. I got a pretty decent hand. I'm starting to lose it, but I'm still an old man pick-up hoops game.
Were you a guard, or what position?
Guard, yeah, not big enough to do anything else.
I think a lot of people think that West Jenny kids are just a pipeline to Syracuse. And there was a time where I think the first kid that this is not true, because you had Mike Buzzle, who went down to the Naval Academy a long time ago, outstanding, All-American, Hall of Famer. But when you were getting recruited, what did you do? Did you do your traditional 5 visits, or how did your process work, and why Syracuse?
Yeah, my process actually was a little bit faster than I would have hoped. Being a goalie, I think there's only a few spots, so I was kind of helping on Virginia initially, and the goalie ahead of me in that class committed early on, so it was between Duke, Cornell, and Syracuse for me. I just, the Duke thing, Coach Janowski had just got the job, and at Cornell, it was an amazing fit. I love Coach Sambroni, a West Genny guy. I love the Ivy League, aspirations. I just, really felt at home with Syracuse, having Coach Donahue there and Coach Defco, and I wanted to major in communication. So it really was a no-brainer at that point. So my process was a little bit faster.
So when did you commit? At what year in high school?
Junior year, summer, so going into senior year. So, that was, I think I was like the fourth kid in my class to commit, too. That used to be early, so things have changed.
Any other notable teammates that graduated with you in high school?
Tim Defco.
Oh, wow.
And Colin Donahue. Timmy came in with me, so him and I went to Syracuse together, and then Colin went to Rutgers and transferred in eventually to Syracuse, so we all ended up together there by then. We had a number of guys. Chris Albertine went to the Naval Academy, so we had a number of Division I guys that year.
What was the conditioning drill that you could close your eyes and feel yourself huffing and puffing about at Western?
I mean, when we were in the winter, it was freezing cold on a parking lot. We had to do the 3-leave until everybody caught, and nobody dropped the pass. So if anybody dropped the pass, he had to do it again, and I remember that being a nightmare at the end of every practice when guys were cold and tired.
But what about a conditioning drill for you, one that you dreaded at Syracuse?
That would be the 440 test, yeah. Okay. Our Hal Luther put in a 440 test that we did, and we did it every Monday in the fall, and then we would test again when we got back. And, I threw up more times than I care to remember on that test. Can
you describe for our listeners what was the drill?
Yeah, so it's really just a running test. It's end line to end line of a lacrosse field 4 times. So down, back, from end line to end line. And you have a 2-minute break, and you do it 3 times. And we started it my freshman year, and they still do it. I saw guys training for it over Christmas break this year, and it is something that's it's not easy. It's something you have to train for it to be ready for.
And then you have to do it under a certain time.
Yeah, there's a time for each of the 3 run tests.
Wow. What was the biggest transition for you as a player going from high school to college? What did you have to work on? I went to Herkimer before going to Syracuse, and I had to take the overhead check and put it in my pocket for a couple of years. What were the transitions you had to make?
I think the velocity, just the speed. Coach Defco and I talked a lot my freshman year just about getting caught up to the speed of the shot, because it just happens so much faster. You see so many more shots per game. So we worked a lot on just seeing, a lot of speed, even from far distances, just to get used to seeing the ball at that velocity. So we worked on that a good amount in the fall, and that was a tough transition early on.
When you are getting ready for the season, what are the things and the exercise you need to do more of? The
workouts I do leading into seasons, everything's lower body explosion. Right now I'm doing a lot of more of the uppers to create that, just a better strength, but it'll be mostly footwork, agility, lower body explosion, box jumps, specific to getting to the ball, and then focus on my technique. That's more of a lacrosse focus at that point.
I would argue this, because I played until my 30s, that lacrosse players are like wine, they get better with age. What part of your game has improved the most in your mind at this point in your career?
I think just my ability to know where I am on the field and to take away angles. I would say that probably 2 years ago is the best year of my career. I agree with that. I think I've gotten better as a player as I've gotten older, strictly because you understand how to see plays develop. You understand angles, especially as a goalie, and you play the percentages a little bit more than you ever have, and you're just a little bit more efficient in your movement. So I would say that, I hope that my best playing years are to come, and I think my training has become a lot more focused, too, since I've gotten older.
Who's the defenseman that you played with, and I'm sure you probably played with a lot over the years, that you feel, wow, I love when this is my cover guy? I mean, who's the person that you're like, okay, I'm getting ready to go out and pick up the ball because it's about to be on the ground? Who's that guy?
Well, for me, it's always been Joel White. I mean, I've played with him now. He's been my roommate and my teammate for 10 years running at this point. So, we've been in every hotel together. We've been on every field together. We've played both Empires as a high school player, to Syracuse for 4 years, to the Rochester Rattlers for now 6 years coming up.
Wow.
I just trust him. I think him and I have a kind of an innate sense of where each other's going to be, and a communication that you can really, something good's going to happen when he's out there.
Wow, that's a huge plug for Joe White. Thank you so much for taking the time to do the interview. I learned a lot, and you made me laugh a lot.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
To check out our podcast archive, suggest show topics, and advertise on the show, and to book me as a guest and or speaker, visit our website, www.fredopie.com. That's www.fredopie.com. For information about advertising on the show, please email us at fdopie@gmail.com. That's fdopie@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and be good.